What's up everybody, it's Victon here with my second League Start build guide of 3.20, the Summon Raging Spirits Necromancer. Over the League, we've seen various minion skills come and go from being the top tier meta builds, until here we are today at a point where I believe this SRS build is the top all-around best minion build possible. It's pretty cheap to get you going all the way to tier 16 maps, but can still scale very well with currency investment. It's incredibly tanky with high armor, life, and max block, perfect for new players, casual players, or people like me that just want to chill and grind some PoE but not have to use your brain too much while playing. It's also going to be really good for the new League mechanics, since you can cash your SRS, then run around dodging mechanics while your minions do the damage, which should help you get to higher tier rooms easier. Same goes with bossing. It doesn't have giga damage or anything like that, but it's more than enough that on my SRS character last League, I did all content including the Uber Pinnacle bosses. It just feels nice and comfy to play. It's one of the last minion builds out there that feels like that has a great mix of damage and defenses without having to trade your kidney for super expensive gear. Now, like I said, I did play this last League as my main build, so I've worked out the absolute best way to level this build up in a League Start scenario and what your purchase order should be for upgrades. In this guide, I of course have a full path of building for you guys that's going to come with a detailed, easy to read note section on how exactly to level this build, a custom leveling loot filter for this build, and lastly the trade links that you need for every single item that you're going to purchase on your journey from a League Start build to your final in-game version. Anyways, with all that being said, before we get going, if this guide or any of my other content helps you out in any way possible, hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Leave a comment saying what build y'all are going to be playing this League. I would love to hear that. And if you really enjoy my content and want to support my channel, consider taking a look at my Patreon, where I have a super helpful community Discord and actually do personal build reviews for you guys all the time in there as well. I also stream on Twitch as much as possible, and certainly the most at League Start, so come on over there and say hi if you see me online. Link for all of that's going to be in the video description. And without further ado, let's go ahead and hop straight into the path building. Okay, cool, so here we are, and first things first, I do have a leveling path fully laid out for you guys. About every 10 levels or so, you can click down here and choose these as you progress through the campaign and into maps. It's going to show you all your skill points and your ascendancy points as well. If you click over here, you're going to find your skill gems for the final mapping setup. Click here, and this is going to be all of your items. And moving into the notes section, what you're likely going to spend most of your time with as you level up your character, I have a full comprehensive leveling guide for you guys, all color coded and super easy to read on the go. It shows you what you want your links to be and the colors to be at the end of each act, and tells you what gems to take for rewards and also what you want to buy from vendors. I even have a copy and paste code for you guys that you're going to type into the vendors to look for certain colors and links, which definitely will help you speed up your leveling time. Going back into the skill tree, I won't go too in depth here, but feel free to ask in the comments or my Twitch chat if you have any questions, and I'll absolutely answer every one that I can. I will still go over a few things though. One is that this tree itself is actually pretty straightforward and similar to some of the other minion builds I've used in the past. You get a decent chunk of life, max attack and spell block without a Rumi's concoction, and max chaos resistance, so you have a really high effective hit pool. And like I said, it's super tanky. It's one of the tankiest builds out there. You also take Eldritch Battery with this build, which is pretty important because SRS cost even more mana to cast as of last League, but Eldritch Battery takes care of that completely, and you get to fully reserve your mana as well. It's a lot of points to get out there, but 100% worth it. Yeah, other than that, it's a very basic, tanky with decent damage minion tree. And speaking of damage, this version with the pretty cheap gear, I'd say for a couple divines, you get this level of tankiness and also about 3.8 to 4 million DPS. Certainly not the highest DPS, but you're also a minion build, so you kind of get to run in circles, dodge mechanics, which is another huge benefit to the build. And it's more than enough damage to pretty much do all the content in the game up until you get to the Uber bosses. Anyways, that's the tree. Now let's go over the ascendancy points, since I did change one of them. First, you're going to get Commander of Darkness to help with early League resistances, then Mistress of Sacrifice for skill effect duration, and also Offerings affect you, which can either have Flesh Offering to speed up your campaign completion time, or switch over to Bone Offering to be super tanky while leveling. Third, we're going to get Mindless Aggression, and lastly, we actually have two options here, but I prefer Plaguebringer for some AoE and 10% more damage as well as 10% reduced damage taken if you have a corpse next to you. You won't have this buff up 100% of the time, but it will certainly be up enough to where you can feel the difference even on boss fights, since you cast Desecrate for those corpses pretty frequently. You could opt to get the consistent damage buff through Unnatural Strength, but it's less damage, and personally I just like Plaguebringer more because it gives us some survivability with that damage reduction, so that's what I went with. Lastly, we are killing all the bandits, and we are taking the Pantheon that gives us freeze immunity. Alright, cool, that is the skill tree. Let's move on over to the gym setup. Okay, so keep in mind, this is our final gym setup. If you're curious about leveling gym setup, that's going to be in the notes section, which is very detailed and laid out for you pretty well to follow. First and foremost is our Summon Raging Spirits with Unleash, Multi-Strike, Fire Pen, Minion Damage, and then your sixth link is Ruthless. And we're going to swap that Ruthless with Melee Splash when we're mapping. Then for bosses, we have Ruthless, but honestly, even map bosses, I always kept in Melee Splash, and it's totally fine. It's really just for those big bosses that you're going to have Ruthless on. For your wand, which will be auto-casting what you have, we're going to have Desecrate at level 1, Life Tap, and Bone Offering. For our Stone Golem, we have Feeding Frenzy and Combustion, which is going to be some nice damage buffs, and Elemental Weakness as one of our 2 curses on its own. For support minions, we have Specters, Meat Shield, Minion Life, and Animate Guardian, or Zombies if you prefer over Animate Guardian. And for the Specters, we have 1 Carnage Chieftain and 1 Arena Master. And lastly, we have two links, with Anger and Generosity as one of them, and then separately, not linked to Generosity, we have Tempest Shield and Determination. Very good, moving on to our items. So to start, we have a pretty cheap but decent starter one with +1 to level of all skill gems and some minion attack speed, and make sure to have an open suffix so that we can craft on there trigger socketed spells when you use a skill. That's how we're going to automate our offering skills. For our shield, we're going to have honestly anything, but I like Lionized Remorse because it has a ton of life, great armor, and good block, and it's pretty cheap. For our helmet, we have any decent rare with +2 to level of minion skill gems. Try and get some life and resistances on it if you can. For the body, we're going to start out with a Tabula Rasa, and even having a Tabula Rasa with +2 to minion gems corrupted on it is pretty solid. Then we're going to transition into a Skin of the Loyal, which actually gives us a ton of armor and energy shield. You're going to want 3 blue and 3 red on that one. It's best in slot until you can afford a Covenant, which is going to have a ton of damage. For our gloves, we just have life and resistances with some Chaos Res if you can, but do note, do get the minion damage from the Searing Exarch implicit, which is going to give you some nice extra damage. For boots, again, very simple here with life, resistance, and move speed. One thing to note is I always try and have an open suffix on my gear so I can craft Chaos Resist. This is what's going to help me easily cap out my Chaos Resist. For our amulet, make sure there is some dex on it, and then we're going to get +1 to level all fire skill gems as SRS is a fire tag, and then just some life and resistances if possible. Anoint Grave Intentions, which is super cheap for some nice minion survivability. For our first ring, we have an Amethyst ring to basically just get as much chaos resistance as you can. And for our second ring, we have a Dodri's Damning, which is a new option for the build because of how powerful curses are this league. With this, we can now cast both Flammability and Elemental Weakness for some really nice damage on bosses. For belt, just a basic life belt, and I actually got some energy shield as well as some armor on it. Pretty cheap belt, and it does help a bit with our ES pool since we are using ES to cast Eldritch Battery. For flasks, grab a life flask with bleed removal, very important there. An overflowing chalice to keep up all of our flasks constantly rolling. A taste of hate for a ton of defenses. A basalt and a granite flask with increased armor and curse reduction on either of them. Then make sure to enchant them all with use when charges are full so they can auto cast for you. For our cluster jewels, we have a super basic large cluster to start off with, just Feasting Fiends. Obviously you can get a much better cluster out there, but this is just a good cheap starter that you can even roll yourself to get going. Same thing with these small clusters, pretty easy to get, but they add a ton of block chance. For our Abyss Jewels, you want one with minion damage if used a minion skill recently, and as much flat minion damage as possible, whether that's fire, cold, or lightning. SRS actually benefit a ton from flat damage to minions. And that's it for our items. Alright, cool. So let's move on to the trade links. Now, I've started to use only the trade links through Better PoE Trading app extension for either Chrome or Opera GX like I have here instead of my normal Google Sheet. It's just too good and very easy to use, so that's what I'm only use going forward. I hope you guys don't mind. Now, I've actually got two links for you guys. The first one is the League Starter gear, and the second is some in-game gear options to work towards. If you've never used this before, you're going to go ahead and install it. The link is in the video description. And a quick little tutorial here is to scroll down to the import folder. We're going to click that and then come back to this video description and find the Pastebin link down at the bottom. We're going to go to the Pastebin link website. We're going to click copy raw paste data. And then we're going to go back to the PoE Trade website. We're going to paste it in there. And there you go. You got all the trade links you need in a nice and neat folder. It's glorious. I've also arranged it so that your purchase order of importance works from top to bottom, meaning that the first items you want to get are at the top and you work your way down to the bottom. And lastly, like I mentioned, I also have a custom leveling loot filter just for this build so you guys can easily find socket colors and links for your build while you level up. It seems like a simple thing, but seriously, it helps so much. I use these myself and really do encourage others to try it. To get this going, just click on the link in the video description, then find the SRS leveling, SSF, and trade filter, and then you're going to click follow, and you are good to go. It's going to show up in your game. And that's it, everybody. That wraps it up. If you do end up choosing to play this build, definitely let me know in the comments. I really think it's a strong option this league. It's got great damage, one of the tankiest builds out there. Also being minion build, it's going to be really good for the league mechanics. So honestly, all around a great choice. And I hope you guys liked this guide. I hope it helped y'all out, and if it did, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really does help, and I greatly appreciate it. That's all I got on this one, guys. I'll see y'all in the next one.